There used to be a sort of throwaway college course they called Music Appreciation, an easy credit where you listened a lot but learned very little. As an undergraduate music major, I would be amazed that some of my friends didn't know the difference between a cello and a violin, or why a conductor was even necessary. Often they'd say the subject was over their heads. Well, one of our premier Nashville music journalists has written a book that takes a fascinatingly new approach to the understanding of musicality. That is, our awareness and ability to discover and delight in the stuff we listen to. Here's what Craig Havighurst writes on page 6 to set up the great observations to come. Popular music, from rock to rap to country, has been privileged in the media and marketplace for so long that many don't think of instrumental music or concert music at all. He goes on, too many brilliant young and midlife professional artists are off the radar for 95% of us. Orchestras are struggling with an aging audience nationwide, and opening a jazz club today would, in most cities or towns, be either an act of philanthropy or a suicide mission. True that, as the kids say, even here in Music City. My conversation with Craig inspired me to explore again. Maybe you will too. I'm Demetria Kalodimos. It's Banner and Company. Craig, thanks for taking time for us.
Demetria, it's a joy to be with you. Thanks.
You know, you have the job that at one point I thought I wanted. You know, a way to combine a musical upbringing and education with the excitement of storytelling. But you didn't set out that way either, did you?
No, I did set out to be a storyteller of some kind because journalism was on my mind from about late high school through college. And then when I went to grad school, it was with some kind of either newspaper or a magazine feature writing in mind. And I got into a policy and law kind of a direction. Pretty cool to do. It was interesting intellectually, did that for about 8 or 9 years. But in the meantime, I'd moved to Nashville and I was around the music that I came to be near as a fan. And then I began to pick off stories and then it picked up steam from there.
Yeah. That first story was in the Wall Street Journal, am I right?
Yeah, 1998. And I wanted to tell the story of this emerging Americana format and idea. And through that one story, met Billy Block, met Grant Alden of No Depression magazine. I just started calling people cold to say, I'm an explorer, I'm a fan, I'm a writer, and I'm trying to find out what this is. Help me understand it from a repertorial point of view. And then it became something I chronicled for 25 years.
Yeah, but had you never started on violin, could you have approached music journalism the way you have?
I've wondered that, and the one counterfactual that I run in my head is, what if I had been started on piano instead of violin? And the real reason is because the violin, you learn rote music off a page, and you learn one melody at a time. It's not a chordal instrument. And so I didn't know about chords and chord progressions until my mid-teens, and the first instrument I added on was first the drums, but then I added on the bass. I wanted to take bass lessons to be able to play rock and pop in a garage band and just have an understanding of it, and that led to some jazz. And that what it led to was chord charts. And when my teacher there showed me chord charts, and I was explained to me that music was made on top of the melody we all are familiar with, was sort of mated with and in concert with a chord progression, I went, oh, well, they never showed me that in violin lessons, as great as those were. I had an intuition there was chords in music, I could tell, but the idea that they flowed from one to the other and that the architecture of how they flowed was going to have one effect on the ear and the mind if it was in a rock tune, another if it's in a traditional jazz 32 bar classic song from the middle of the American century, to a more abstract modal kind of post 70s Miles Davis thing. But if I'd had the piano lessons, I would have had that chordal knowledge. I would have been improvising earlier. And I think that's the one place in the fork in the road that I might have become a professional musician. Just because jazz piano has I love it so much, and I listen to it so widely, and I'm so jealous of people that can sit down at a piano and extemporize and just feel harmony and feel rhythm, and it's the most versatile instrument. But violin lessons, hey, my parents gave me, they were music fans, mostly of classical and opera. And they lived and breathed it. They traveled to see it. They invested in seeing it and in the arts in our community in North Carolina. So I just really am grateful to them for just getting me started on serious music at an early age.
Yeah. In the very first pages of your new book, you describe an almost out-of-body type experience participating in an orchestral performance. I related immediately, having been someone that was playing in an ensemble at a young age. But what was that? Tell us again.
Right. That was a all-state youth orchestra. The one year that I can't remember if I auditioned more than once, but one year I auditioned and made all-state as a violinist, probably in the second violin section. And I don't remember much about the whole experience, but I do remember this one piece of a orchestral suite, non-vocal, from an opera called Der Rosenkavalier by Richard Strauss. My parents had made me aware that they regarded that as some of the most lush and beautiful music that they knew. And so I think I had a predisposition to kind of tune into it a bit. But there was this feeling of being in an orchestra that was suddenly pretty high level. My prior Saturday morning youth orchestra was fine. It was good, and we had some fun and made friends, and it was social, and it was good for me. But when you're in a group when you're an orchestra that everybody's pretty serious and knows how to read and knows how to play the dynamics and pay attention to the conductor, suddenly the quality of the music was just up many notches from what I'd experienced. And there you are in it, surrounded by it, and your voice on your little instrument is part of a section, which is part of an orchestra. And there, this piece to this day gets me really emotional and choked up, because about 2 or 3 minutes into this suite, there's just this particular moving set of harmonies that just are shifting and flowing. It's very lovely and lush. And that stuck out as a place that I wanted to. My first opening of the book had been a little more intellectual, a little more, I don't know, I didn't feel like people would understand just how deeply I felt, and just how deeply music fans, when they hear something that's really moves them, what does it mean to be moved by music that's not coming from the song-based forms that we all know.
Right.
We all know what it's like to be moved by Raoul Malo, rest his soul, or Mary Gaucher doing her, with an intimate story to tell, and lyrics that can work on you. If it's just the music, what are we listening to and listening for? And that was a moment with that Strauss that I went, this matters. This really makes me feel visceral and physical and sensual. And so that carried that, and I've continued my love of composed and classical music, although I don't listen to it a ton, but when I do, I seek it out in live settings. And but things that I learned in that orchestra and in that era affected my interest in bluegrass and jazz and almost everything else.
When I read that part of the book, I immediately thought of my own experience, and I went back to the 1946 Walt Disney Peter and the Wolf.
Right, yeah.
Which really is a brilliant thing when you re-listen to it, because it teaches you the sounds of the orchestra. Yep. The story unfolds. It basically, I don't think you ever listen to an orchestra differently again if you hear that as a young child. I don't know if that was in your repertoire.
It was. And so were those times when Leonard Bernstein was on TV doing the Young People's concerts. Yep. And there was a kind of more of a conversation in the, I think up until about the 1990s in American culture, kind of more of what they used to call middle brow. Like, let's see if we can take regular people, working people, and help them understand what's great about highly ambitious music, about music that's got lots of parts, that's not obvious on first hearing, and it's not just about the beat and the story, but that's really got something going on with harmony and texture, timbre, and all those elements. So that was super motivating for this book, because I don't think we've had that conversation in the country and the culture for in the 21st century. With that said, who's your book for? It's for the curious. It's for people who want to read music, get in touch with music theory without a music theory course. It has sort of three broad parts. It starts with more like sociology and how do we get here? What is here with music in our culture? And how many forces in media have been, I'd say, hiding certain whole fields of music from the public and not giving them the tools and the ways in, but in fact, literally, when it comes to commercial radio, television, TV news, entertainment shows, and award shows, which is where most people interface with the music business and with new music on TV. I kind of try to get people to go, wait a minute, there's more to explore here, and then try to get them motivated to explore it, and then walk them through a middle of the book, which I like to say, it's not teaching you about music theory. It's not teaching you music theory, but it's teaching you about music theory. Teaching you about how musicians think, what they would respond to, and and I count myself as a musician, and my conversations with musicians over these years, what are the kinds of things they notice? What makes them go, oh, yeah, You say you can spot them in the crowd. Yeah, sometimes you really can. And I've had moments where at a show, something will happen inside the band. Somebody will answer somebody. Somebody will do something spontaneous and special. And I'll just delight in it, and I'll look up and somebody else make eye contact and be like, yeah. And musicians don't have some super secret language. I think they want the larger group of the world to know. And I think also that here in Nashville and in my world, where I run with musical people and I'm blessed to have it as a kind of my daily bread, I have to put myself in the shoes of folks who don't kind of get that surrounding many different signals and conversation points. Many people in this country can go through, decades of life without ever having had somebody go, no, you really should listen to Miles Davis. Let's sit together and just take it in. And then what are your questions? And then look what it says in the back of the liner notes, a kind of blue, about what improvisation is like from the musician's point of view, with simple metaphors and, beautiful language that makes you go, oh, I can relate to that. And I have a point where I really try to help people understand the difference between food in the media and music in the media. My next question right here, you make a great point about the Food Network versus MTV, how one cultivated understanding and the other sort of force-fed. Yeah, the Food Network was the first of a series of how food got on television, which was very, it really talked about the subject. It told you about everything from sociology to science to lore to history to the personalities of why did Julia Child have such charisma and how did that affect her career arc? And there was just so much information. And as one magazine writer I quoted said, it turned us into a nation of foodies. And we really did. Our food, the sort of caliber of what we expected and where our grocery stores held went up through the 21st century, and MTV, which clicked on in the 80s, very quickly went to a network that was presenting finished music videos with flash, costumes, lighting, special effects, dance moves, and nothing wrong with any of that, but it was all entertainment. And the actual nurturing core nutrition part of the music was very much left behind. It just was not part of that conversation. And I think by contrast, my luck in finding bluegrass in college and after college, through living in several different cities and being at different festivals, I'm so appreciative of how the bluegrass audience has kind of continually raises the bar and their own knowledge. They're pretty hungry for why did that lick work? Why did that what's going on rhythmically? The bands talk about it sometimes on stage. It's a little more just accessible. I feel like it shows and tells better than other genres of music.
Yeah. It's also interesting that Food Network is thriving, whereas MTV.
Yeah.
You know, something could be observed there, I think.
Right. And music on TV, when I go, there's so rare that I go, thank God they told that story. The pop star is the easy story to tell.
Sure.
The emerging, star in the making as a violin soloist, a jazz pianist, or a conceptual composer who makes more of some kind of collage, some sort of more beautiful art out of sound. The producers don't think those will get the ratings, and they just hardly ever get their story told.
It's Banner and Company. I'm Demetria Kalodimos. We'll be right back.
Song-based music, as I say early on in the book, is doing really well in our culture. It is 97% of what we as Americans stream. And the latter 3% is basically, all of classical and all of jazz and all of experimental and avant-garde. And that's all the old stuff and all the new stuff, right. Which is pretty wild to think of a young person even thinking, I should go to Berkeley and study the saxophone or study the piano. I mean, God bless them for persisting in that environment. I'm very alarmed by the large portion of our population just thinks, what is the point if you can't study it and get a job out of it? What's the point? Well, our humanities really are the thing that are keeping us stitched together in a divisive time. So I just made notes about things that made me go, oh, there's an observation that save it for whatever, for a book or or for questions, and to pursue my interest in these genres that I cover, and built off of that. What do we listen to and why, and what don't we tend to listen to and why not? And what are the things that could bridge people into music that we would regard as more challenging, more difficult, more abstract or esoteric? Because I found that for me, if I didn't like something, I would bump against it, come back to it later, and gradually grow into a love of music that is maybe some would regard as more advanced. I don't know if that's the word, but certainly it's the acquired tastes that are often the greatest tastes that you become accustomed to and then a real passionate advocate for. Yeah.
I mean, even as you say how iTunes forced us into album, artist, whatever.
Song, right.
Song, yeah.
Yeah, that is, I don't think enough people appreciate that our digital musical universe was shaped by Apple, and they boiled all music down. Every individual unit of work was a song by an artist from an album. Those three words. And if you go to Spotify today, it's album, artist, song. And in whole genres of music, song doesn't make sense. And there's no, what is a movement? Is that a song? Well, if that's what you find it in Spotify now. Apple had to then create a new app called Apple Music Classical, and it's actually really good service. And they kind of changed the taxonomy there. So I'll give them credit for that. But we wound up, artist is also limiting in a symphony, who's the artist? The composer, the orchestra, the soloist, the conductor. Yeah. And so there's many artists involved. So identifying that one artist it caters to and privileges pop music.
You also wrestle with, I don't get it versus I don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are things we do not get, mm-hmm. and also things we don't like. But to know that there's a line there to be studied, yeah. I think is inspiring.
Thanks for noticing that. I think partly when I grew up, I had two college radio stations playing freeform and college rock, and that would lead to some unusual stuff. And there was some great jazz programming, which I spent a lot of time listening to. And I had opportunities. My parents went to concerts, took me to concerts. So I had an ample opportunity to hear lots of different stuff. And if I didn't like something, I went, I don't know about that, but somebody takes it seriously. Somebody made it, and I'm a kid. I don't have any wherewithal to say that sucks or that's that's bad. And I had too many experiences with music that came back in my life 10, 20 years later that I went, now I see what was going on. My growth over time, I was ready to hear Miles Davis' Bitches Brew, for example, a record that I wouldn't have processed very well if it had been my first exposure to Miles Davis. Mm-hmm. I Got Kind of Blue from 1959, when everything is quite serene and melodic and lush. And to jump, 10 years in his career, you're hearing stuff that can be, people would regard as dissonant, distorted, odd, frustrating, where am I, disorienting. And I think that it's very important that people not try to come up with a value judgment about unusual music, strange music to them that's too quick. So that's why I say, don't just say, I don't get it yet, maybe someday, versus I don't like it. And then with time, you will find whole fountains of music that are not for you. Yeah, and that's legit and fair. There's too much music to process as a consumer and a fan and a human being. So fair enough.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I will. Is there anything in the I don't like it, Craig column?
Sure. There is, in my world of jazz, which I just adore. I love the story of it. I love America's contribution. I love its civil rights story. Everything about jazz is dear and important to me. But yes, there's quite a bit of music, even by people I really like. There's a saxophone player named Charles Lloyd, just jumps to mind. I've heard him in settings where I absolutely was riveted, and I've heard him in other settings where it was cacophonous and just simply I was never going to find my way into it and turn it on and love it. I think also there's seasons of, just times in my life where I'm really ready to be really challenged and really ready to sit with music that's pretty daring and weird. And if I'm in a live setting, I'm more patient, I'm more accepting. I read in the end of the book about the Big Ears conference festival in Knoxville that's been going on for most of 15 years. And it's such an amazing array of sounds from the sweet to the impenetrable. And there's an audience for all of it. And you can browse from one to the other and go, yeah, that's just not doing it to me. If you go across the street, there may be something that's also difficult or that others would find ugly that you find beguiling and fascinating. But learning to listen to modern music in the composed and improvised spaces was a decades-long journey. That's really important for people to understand, that you're going to be here as a musical human being from your childhood.
From the lullaby to whatever.
And your teen years and your young adult years. And that's some years when people begin to say, I don't have time for music. I don't have time to play an instrument. I've got kids or a job. I'm ambitious. And what I used to love about music, I don't have time for that anymore. So I listen to the same stuff I did when I was a teenager as comfort food. But I don't keep growing. But I think everybody can get through that into a place where as you approach your 30s, your 50s, your 70s, you're still growing and still like, show me something new.
Yeah. And this book, I think, is something new, legitimately. I don't think there's a crowded shelf with books that take this approach. And you observe that sports writers are sort of allowed to do analysis and talk about intricacies of the game, and people are thirsty to hear it. Why do we cut off the discussion about music at that surface level and not go deep with those that are legitimately wanting to discuss those sorts of things?
Absolutely. Sports has done an exemplary job of explaining the game along with showing the game.
Yeah.
And discussing and celebrating the game, whichever game is your game, But music, what I would call sort of high attention music, has not had those champions in mainstream media that regular folks are going to come up against in daily life. You have to go seek it out. And let me say that there's wonderful resources for understanding music and developing your own musicality on YouTube now. There are great just channels and talkers who have taken on this niche, but you've got to go find it.
Yeah.
You've got to take it into your own hands.
Let's talk a little about Nashville.
Yeah.
There are still people moving here every day. to be close to the heartbeat of creativity, even though you can send tracks back and forth on the internet and God knows how many different ways. Is the dream still alive? Are people still making it? And are they getting so discouraged that the machine is so big they could never play a role in the bigger picture?
I've got that question is so potent and so dominant now, and the conversation about streaming royalties is so pressing and loud that I really want to come up with a more methodical way of answering that. And I've got a project in mind for 2026 that's going to try to do that. That's going to be more of a methodical sort of focus group and dealing with basically job satisfaction. I'm not going to survey people about how much they make, but whether it's in line with their needs and their hopes to be an artist. But I'm going to focus on the musicians, not the singers and songwriters, because singer-songwriter, that path, the biggest disadvantage that world has now, which goes unacknowledged or less acknowledged, is that the supply went hypernova around the turn of this century.
Yeah.
Between easier to record and to learn, between
home studios and equipment.
Yeah, exactly. The home studio, and then just a culture that encouraged younger people to chase their dreams and do what you love, and the money will follow kind of story. So we have a kind of hyper supply, even in the Americana world that I cover. I struggle, and my program director and people I know struggle to keep up with what is important out of this giant supply that's coming at us, out of this huge raft of new music. What's the best? What's the stuff that's going to have lasting impact? We really work hard coming up with that. But as far as musicians go, people that choose to play a mandolin, choose to be a side musician, to compose, to arrange, to work in studios and work around and be in the creative side of music, I do see evidence that, they're not bailing. That they are saying to their friends who are in their 20s or coming down from Berkeley after they finish their degrees, come to Nashville. You'll meet people and you'll thrive. And I do see them thriving. Some of them wind up getting on big tours. We've also had a world where in Americana there are pretty legit stars, lots of them being made now. So there's more tours on buses with crews and with where musicians can make a good paycheck. Sometimes those jobs last for 2 or 3 years, and then something shifts in the artist's mind and they move on. But I do feel like there's flexibility and fluidity. People teach. And sometimes they walk dogs on the side too, and they have side gigs. Teaching is easier because it's online and they can reach students around the world. I feel like it's a healthy time. I've never said to anybody, "Wow, this dream is fading." This town, at least the part I know, roots music, string band, and bluegrass music, I feel like it's on solid-ish ground. But we do have a messed up economy in some ways for how people get compensated.
I think there's a certain unusual benevolence too among players in this town. I think they're generous and not too territorial. If there's a young upstart that comes in and is on fire, there are people that will gift that person I've seen it, gift that person an instrument or encourage them or connect them with the right people. And that has a vibe, I think, that you might not find in some other places that are a little more spread out.
It also does a great job of sifting the quality to the top pretty quick.
Yeah.
The musicians know. And so when you see artists like Sierra Farrell or Margot Price emerging out of Honky Tonk Tuesday, that's a place where people are going week after week after week. The crowd gets it, the other musicians get it, and the talent, the cream rises in this world. And that's another thing that I think it has going for it.
Are you a practicer? Do you still practice?
I've been on a pretty good run lately.
Really?
Yeah, me and my guitar are in speaking terms, and I'm looking for ways in the new year to play out. And I just asked for and got a Appalachian banjo, which I've never tackled, but I'm from North Carolina. I love Western North Carolina's
the law,
music.
Isn't it?
So you get
Carolina?
issued one at birth. You're issued a carton of cigarettes and a banjo. That's the '70s, folks. That was my time.
Yeah, right. stop talking to you without talking about Music City Roots, R.I.P.
Yeah.
It was a long adventure, but it was a real needed exposure for that slice of music. And I'm assuming that you look back fondly on those years and probably have hopes that it might come back.
Greatest experience of my life, professionally, creatively. It was absolutely extraordinary. And something about there's all these little ephemeral micro decisions and judgments that people with the control of the show's aesthetic and our founding creators, Todd Mayo and John Walker, they just constantly made their decisions based on what's in the best interest of the musicians and the music on stage, the onstage atmosphere. And that created an energy with the audience that was a very high attention, passionate audience that understood that music is more than a hot, flashy lick, that they knew how to read the emotional tenor of these performances, and how when something was special, I never said, that was really great, and this audience is just not getting it. I've seen it happen, but not at Music City Roots. Mm-hmm. There was this collective surge of belief and beauty when so often, I mean, every week and a few times a week, something magical happened on stage. And I just think it was, there are occasionally in our culture those times when there's a dream and there's a judgment and a kind of just sort of curatorial control, and if things come together, also a sense of place. And we really wanted to design the show with that sense of place, celebrating Nashville and its legacy. Then, at that time, WSM was about 85 years old or something. I just hit 100 here.
Right.
And we were inspired by that time when musicians like the new Carter sisters come to town, get on the radio from Nashville, and are heard in hills and hollers and cities and factories thousands of miles away, and build this beautiful artistic kind of culture, build a culture that way. People who put culture first and figure out how to make the money work, and how to find philanthropists and sponsored the branded entertainment that has driven good music for so many years. Every now and again, these things come together, and they're hard to keep together. They are resource intensive, and Music City Roots now is under new management and ownership up at Harkin Hall in Madison. Wish them well. They have launched one reunion show, and I know that they hope to make it a series, and we'll see how it goes.
It's Banner and Company, and my guest is music writer, broadcaster, and filmmaker Craig Havighurst. We'll be right back. In the book, you want people to listen for things rather than listen to things. Yeah. Tick off some things we should be listening for in general.
Right.
I mean, one of them is a surprise that you don't expect in a piece of music.
Yes, I think that's how much of the classical repertoire and the tradition was built, was to create a sonic progression, a motion of a melody moving with chords that felt like it was going to come back home, and then they would surprise you and move you to another key or another motif that would then, but you're like, oh, I hear a little bit of that in the first one. You listen with memory to classical music. You want to be thinking, you want to be aware of those, of what they call themes or motifs, and then how they get manipulated into variations, and almost commenting on that initial motif. So that was that tradition, and so you'll feel that in that classical place. In jazz, you're listening for somebody making a soloist making a statement, an emotional statement in the moment, by pushing and pulling energy, pushing and pulling the tempo, roaring up to a big high, letting you into a very intimate space, shifting the mood. Jam bands do this too. They'll suddenly take it where you think you know where you're going, and then suddenly, you're in another space, and if you can do it with delight and with some logic, if the band can do it with a place that makes you go, oh, I see what they did there. That's surprise is one. I break down the sort of musical universe, the content of music into tone, time, and timbre, broadly speaking. And so timbre is one that I think people have the least amount of familiarity with, but it's really tone color, it's texture, it's instrument choice. It's the literal way that the musician will put their mouth on the horn or the reed, or that the violinist will draw the bow across the string. Rough, gentle, with a harmonic overtone ringing out. All of these little choices are there to be heard. In rhythm, it's things like a dropped beat, or a syncopation coming in and out, or a sudden stop and a start again, where suddenly this happens in soul, happens in EDM, where suddenly everything boom, and then it starts, and you realize that in that moment of silence, your brain and your heart have gone, what's next? And so you're kind of, you're listening for, there's so many kinds of surprise. There's just so many ways to manipulate these 12 tones and these limited number of ways to count. But man, there's literally infinitely deep art form. And listening for stuff to happen in the texture of the music is the secret to listening to music that doesn't have the attention-grabbing story, voice, and familiar person singing a song to you. There's nothing in this book that's anti-song-based music, but it's very much about everything else, because we have, as human beings, such an innate understanding of song and song forms and the approach to music. But that is, song does not equal music, and music is not only song.
Banner and Company is a production of the New Nashville Banner. This episode is produced by Steve Haruch and edited by me. The original music is by Verlin Thompson. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or go to NashvilleBanner.com. You're in good company. Okay, time for our final question.
Oh, for my friend Brian Mansfield. Is that okay to say?
Yes, of course.
Great. And did he know, this is a generic question that he didn't know is for me, right?
Right.
Okay. If you could bring back
one building from Nashville's past and replace what's there now with what was there at some other point in history, what building would you bring back?
Interestingly, the first thing that came to mind in my neighborhood was the business Corner Music and Forks Drum Closet on 12th South. The building I thought was doomed and is not gone, but it's turned into a boutique. And I really thought that was a community. The business still exists, but it was such an anchor on a street that is now, just in my neighborhood. And I studied the story of how Nashville almost tore the Ryman down, and that was something to learn. It was in the 70s, we nearly lost it. There's some recording studios. I like Little Quad there in Midtown because I had a few experiences where I got to watch friends of mine make music there. It had, I learned a bit about its story. Neil Young comes to mind. And I thought that was one that jumps to mind. There's certainly others, but that was one that jumps to mind here that could have been, should have been saved.